In America was like, yeah, which plants are we gonna like? How are we gonna be able to fill it? In Europe was like, which plants are we gonna close? And in China is what? How many plants are we gonna build? Right?
Hello and welcome to the Auto Ethnographer. I'm John Stech, your host on this journey. We travel the globe to bring you stories about culture and the global automotive industry. Fasten your seatbelt and let's get started. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Auto Ethnographer. Today, we'll take a more holistic view on China while looking back at some of the conversations we've had over the past few months. It's almost impossible to turn on the news nowadays without, at least in the auto sector, hearing something about the development of China and the rise of the Chinese automakers. Some of our past guests, between Dr. Susanne Lehmann of Volkswagen, Dr. Helmut Grösser of Mercedes-Benz, Benny Oeyen, then from General Motors Shanghai, and Gianfranco Pizzuto, the founder of Automobili Estrema, they see that there's a clear and red thread in the story of China in the auto industry since the early 2000s. I will have these leading experts walk you through the story in their own words and based on what they experienced. These are all clips that have been previously played in the episodes that were dedicated in full to conversations with these experts. But let's start in the early years. Dr. Susanne Lehmann moved to China with Volkswagen to develop the logistics aspects of their production and their supply chain. This is in the very early 2000s.
Yeah, it was really like feeling very welcome, very open arms for our knowledge, for also the connections to the headquarters that we could offer. And people really were grateful because we had a situation where we made like this big jump. We developed from 3 factories around Anting, where the site for also Shanghai Volkswagen's headquarters is. We still produce the Santana, perhaps compared to the Volkswagen Beetle, the car that was responsible for China's industrialization. And we really did it in a very manual process. We did then really do this big development over 3 years from 2004 to 2007, where we introduced modern processes, IT systems, already the first steps into digitalization with all the knowledge that we could bring into these things. And we were super astonished how flexible the Chinese colleagues are. Even at that time, already much more flexible perhaps than nowadays. These were the wild East years where everything was possible, everything was developing. And we really had a great time.
It was really the beginning of the industrialization and the massive growth of the Chinese auto industry. How did they learn? It was really learning by action, or did you have a lot of, let's say, kind of one-to-one conversations? How did that process and that knowledge transfer work?
It was really literally like putting things on the floor, for example. I remember one visit to I don't tell the name of the company, of course, but one of our really big supplier companies, and they were putting bumpers just outside in the yard. But it was not because of they didn't want to. They did not have the understanding of quality, focus of things that were necessary at that time. It was really just talking to them, explaining why we should do things, and they were pretty comprehensive, taking up all of the suggestions that we made if they found them useful. If not, you could say what you wanted. That was a no-go then. But usually anything useful was accepted.
As an expert in logistics and planning, when you arrived there, how would you compare the status of where they were when you first arrived in the early 2000s? I mean, was there what you would even consider kind of a modern, approach to logistics or supply chain?
We had warehouses, I think 46 warehouses in total in the villages around Anting. And I very often had to talk to the village boss or Communist Party boss of the village in order to speak about what we needed, what our expectations were. And we had mostly ladies working in the warehouses, still with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so paper tags and petroleum lamps. But this was really just at the beginning. As I said, after 3 years, we worked with them. We introduced SAP warehouse management, transport management. We had a logistics center, and this took only 1.5 years in total to establish it.
Those were from the early days, and even as the automakers adapted to the manufacturing reality of China, they also had to adapt to a customer base that was vastly different from what they knew in their home markets. Here, Dr. Helmut Grösser of Mercedes-Benz explains just how different the customers were and how they had to rethink their products.
And the successor even was primarily built around Chinese customers. The interesting thing with the Chinese customers at that time was they didn't fit into the mindset you had so far. The Germans, the Americans, or in other markets as well, it was this, I have working a long time, I have been successful, I have made it to the top, and now I reward myself by buying an S-Class and of course also showing off that I have been, that I am there, that I made it. Slightly different to the BMW world, where you more wanted to show I'm climbing up, I'm on my way up. With S-Class, you clearly demonstrated I'm there. So traditionally, elder people in the 40s and the 50s who bought these cars, if you looked at China, totally different clusters now happening. On one side, the ones who are linked to, somehow were linked to the party, to the political party, to the communist area, who got in time, whatever, were owning some big company, working closely linked to the Communist Party. And on the other hand, you had the young new technology founders, entrepreneurs. There were people in the 20s. When you asked them, so now you have bought an S-Class, what was the car before? They told you, I didn't have a car before, it was my first car. And when you then ask them, what is it what you are looking for? What is an S-Class for you in your market? It was primarily, especially for the older ones, for the ones linked to the Communist Party, it was, I want to sit in the rear, want to relax, want to have, don't understand why you care about the driver's seat. You can build in whatever you want. It's just a driver sitting there. I don't understand your German mindset of optimizing a car from the driver's seat coming. Just optimize the rear area, put in luxurious materials, put in comfort as much as possible, space, some entertainment. I just want to feel comfortable when I'm driven from space to space. From the younger ones, there were also at that time a lot who were using chauffeurs, had their drivers, but at least on weekends they were driving themselves. They had their family in the rear, and they also said, I need space, I need luxury in the rear. You have to focus far more on the rear. And I don't really care this much about the latest technology, what you know from whatever, German or American customers. So different world, interesting enough, and of course, different requirements for engineering and for positioning of the vehicles.
While foreign manufacturers were allured to what would one day become the world's largest automotive market, they had to make compromises for market entry. Requirements were set on foreign companies, not least of which was technology transfer. Benny Oeyen, then of General Motors Shanghai, talks about the rising threat as he saw it as early as 2015.
Now China has changed a little bit after COVID, etc. But you have to think back in 2013, 2014. This was 2014. China was the hot ticket in town. If you said in any car company or any company in the world, we have a senior or mid-level or senior position, which was the case in my case, available in Shanghai, you had 50 people lining up at the door of HR who want to go. That's very different now. And now there's nobody. There's very young people or very old people. But people with families don't go anymore because they're afraid something might happen, or there was just like this. Oh my God, with what happened with COVID and dynamic zero policies there. Anyway, so this was the hot ticket. So there were HR policies in place. I know in some OEMs that if you have no China experience, you can never get a C-suite job. That's it. It's logical. It's the largest car market in the world and fast growing, etc. So if that's for cars now, but it's probably the largest market for anything in the world. And if you don't have exposure, you don't know your largest market. I mean, then you can't be a C-suite guy, right, or C-suite person. And with joint ventures, right, very different also. You had a joint venture. That's how China set up their business. Was a long-term plan that started 20 years before, something like that. You had to they first protect their market, right? Because that was the only thing they had on offer is their large market with high tariffs. Then you come and produce there. Then they say you can produce here, but it has to be a joint venture. And then the government said, but just production there is not enough. You have to also do value added stuff here, like R&D. So we put up a huge R&D, also a joint venture. And at the time, by the way, you can never be the boss. Only 49%. 51 is the minimum for the Chinese partner. 49 for the Western partner. So Volkswagen, General Motors, we set up giant operations there with wind tunnels and design centers and labs and things like that. And we taught them everything. They know because they didn't know anything and they wanted to go fast. And that's the advantage, I would say, of the political and the society and the economical system in China. Don't get me wrong, I'm not propagating anything. I'm just analyzing, is that you can do long-term stuff. You don't have every 4 years an election and one goes right and then the other one goes left and says the previous one was totally ridiculous and then the other one comes in. You don't have all this razzmatazz. In China, it's very long term. And then you can go fast and create wealth and create industrial might very quickly because you have consistent policies and the government and the companies work hand in hand. They're not against each other and not changing direction every 4 or 5 years. It was basically a very profitable business for the American car and the Western car companies. But I remember, and I was not, after that, I was not very popular, or at that moment, I was not very popular with the American management, General Motors standing up, doing a presentation, which is something that I like and I'm pretty good at, I should say, about the motor show, the Shanghai Motor Show, to all the staff, and there were like 200 Chinese. And I had one slide and I called it, the Red Dragon is coming. And I predicted back then, that was 2015 or something like that, I saw the first seeds of these Chinese manufacturers, how they were getting better with their own brands, their design, etc. I said, this is something you will not be able to stop. These guys are going to come. And then the CFO and my boss at the time, Benny, you're so pessimistic. We're going to sell Buicks and Chevrolets forever. Well, I think, again, look at it now. All the Western manufacturers have been basically booted out of the top 10 and are really struggling because the Chinese brands and the Chinese technology, and especially with BEVs, is coming up. So very interesting.
Now that the Chinese manufacturers and staff had access to and learned the modern way of developing automobiles, they set about at heart-pumping speed to develop their own industry. Here are some observations from Dr. Susanne Lehmann, Benny Oeyen, and Gianfranco on the speed of development.
The second stay that I had, they were already like frog leaping us in order of processes, of systems, of digitalization, especially.
Well, let's go ahead and take that next step and talk about your return to China. I know you did many things, important things in between, but it's a logical jump to talk about your return to China. What changed? How did the people change? How did the technology change, or the processes, as you just mentioned?
Well, as I said, they became pretty experts in process, and also pretty focused on quality management, on improvement cultures, on documentation. So, and they became experts in these things. So when we first arrived, we were the ones like a little bit semi-god, like considered as the person with the knowledge and the relations. Second time, completely different. I mean, we were still very much welcome and accepted, but more as a partner, an equal partner than a teacher or a semi-god. Nothing of that anymore. So even then later in the COVID time, you might have heard that foreigners were considered as not following the rules or bringing the virus, being a risk source. And this really was showing me how that what has changed over the years. First, from being a semi-god to being a perhaps equal partner, then becoming a potential risk person. This was really like I think many of us that had this experience over the time perceived this development. Of course, it's not nice, but I think it's also a natural development that any country in this development scheme follows. Just that China did it so much faster than any other country that I know about. But then when I really came back for work, for living there in 2021, it was a shock, especially the many new OEMs that rose, new brands like Avatar, just to name one, or Neta or BYD, all these big names, or Xiaopeng and so on. So names that were nearly not known in the West at all. And then, especially after COVID, we saw the cars that were like coming up out of the nothing, out of the COVID time perhaps, and were really, really positively shocked about the good quality and the results that they have achieved in so short a time.
Here, Benny Oeyen observes the deep digital integration of everyday life of the Chinese integrated with their vehicles.
America was like, yeah, which plants are we gonna like? How are we gonna be able to fill it? In Europe was like, which plants are we gonna close? And in China is what? How many plants are we gonna build? Right. So it was a very different. It was still on the up. Everything was booming. It changed also a little bit, but you could tell already. And yeah, a few observations when I came there. So you think about China like, oh my God, they're going to be so behind. It's going to be primitive, etc. Forget it. Even in 2014, I already went to China business trips before when you live there. You think you're so advanced with your American way of living, and then you see there's a whole world out there that you don't even know. I still remember, like, oh, here credit card, you take credit cards, right? And they went like, oh, no, and I thought, oh my God, it's going to be cash. No, they already paid by phone. An American in 2015 had no idea what it was paying by phone. Like, oh, we thought we were so advanced with our credit cards. Chinese were already, that's already an old hat. So digitally extremely advanced, very into that. And that is now translating into the vehicles. Huh? If you look at Chinese vehicles, you could see that already coming there. The Chinese have never had this ownership experience where everybody owns a car, etc., because they were too poor when we already had that in Europe and in America. And they immediately went to like mobility 2.0, right? They own cars, they do, but they use a lot of Uber is not there, but they have their own Ubers, let's call it like that. They're users of that. Uber Eats, etc. But this was not existing yet in the US. It was already there. They were called Sherpas. You could order online, and you had these orange colored overall people on their little electric motorbikes, and they went to any restaurant that you want and brought you the food at home and things like that. Things that I had never seen before. So they were this digital connection with the real world and service economy, etc. They're very, very into that. And you can see that now in their cars. I mean, they learned everything from the traditional car making from Volkswagen, General Motors, and all the others. And they're now good at it. They hire good designers, they have great design, etc. But you should see the interfaces of the Chinese cars now. If you go, you should really go to the Shanghai Motor Show. It now just passed. It was in April, but to other motor shows and look at some of these Chinese vehicles. It's phenomenal. It's screens everywhere. It's interactive. You can do whatever you want. They're really, really advanced. So they're software defined. So you have a software as the base, and you build a car around it. Where the European way, it's normal, and the American way is you have a vehicle, and then you add some software and digital services to it.
Gianfranco Pizzuto is amazed at the current status of development and the speed which brought the Chinese to this point.
By the way, this morning I had a coffee with a friend. He said, "So, how would you describe in China?" I said, "Well, it's my impression is that they are, from technological standpoint, from some advancement of society, etc., they're probably 20 years ahead somehow from Europe, at least. But I think they're smart leadership. They have a very, very smart leadership, because most people think that the Communist Party is a party. It's not a party. It's not a party. It is an assemble of managers, top managers, which is a very tiny part of the global population of China, which is 1.4, maybe close to 1.5 billion people right now. So it's a very tiny part. It's an elite that you have access to this elite if you're good. What I can say, what I can see is that they took the best of capitalism and the best of communism and blended. It's the only country where you see, I haven't seen a country in the entire planet that has this blend of total. You might think that it is completely impossible that communist and capitalism could live together, right? Well, the Chinese did it. And I think part of this is that China exists since 4,000 years. They have a culture that goes back 4,000 years, okay? And I think this is the strength of China, that are capable, because they, through the 4,000 years, they had up and downs. Then they have the Mongols coming in, and then they had the Westerns, they had the Japanese, and then the Russians, etc., etc. But they were always capable of getting back and rise. On Sunday, I was visiting Xiaomi. So 3 years ago, nobody knew that this tech company making smartphones and making TVs and making heating device and vacuum cleaners and washing machines, you know. So, what is Xiaomi? Xiaomi is Dyson, Apple, and Tesla together, and they do it in such a fast pace. I was able to get into the showroom where they just presented the Xiaomi SU7 Ultra. And believe me, a $70,000 car with 1,500 horsepower, with such a performance, 350 kilometers an hour of top speed, packaged in a family car where 5 people can fit easily. Well, this is something I have never seen in my entire entrepreneurial life. That somebody coming out from nothing within 3 years develop a car at such high level. That's their first car.
Is there something special about the Chinese culture that allows them to develop like this? Is there a different mindset? The following observations only scratch the surface of this question, but point at some of those differences.
What I still like very, very much about this culture in China is they are experimenting. They're not like Germans perhaps do, like searching for the problems in advance or looking for perhaps arguments to avoid innovation. No, the complete opposite. They're going for it, trying, experimenting. If there is a failure, there is, and then they try another way. It's not so bad, and it's not a catastrophe. Always, of course, following the rules of safety. But they are really much more open to innovations in private life with all the digitalization going on, but also in the factories. I think in China, it's this learning culture. We talked about it earlier. The people, even really, really old people over 90 years old, try to constantly optimize themselves, try to keep training, keep their body and mind fit. And I think this is what we also see in the factories. They always want to get better. They don't give up if they don't find a technical solution immediately. They go on and on and on until they have it.
From a cultural point of view, I thought China was fascinating. Again, very different to Japan and very different to Korea. In certain ways, more modern. And this is shocking because you think like, oh my God, a communist country, they've been asleep forever. And that's like the common perception. It's not the communism sometimes. I'm not a fan of communism at all, but has some, like I said, everything is yin and yang, pros and cons, has some advantages. One of the advantages is the position of the woman. In Korea and in Japan, when I went to Korea, even I saw, I looked around me, a lot of very good looking young girls, but never once 30, 35, you didn't see any. They were all guys. They come there, they work, they meet, they get married, and then the women stays at home. Very 1950s traditional way of thinking. In China, you sit across very senior people from psych with 50-year-old women. So I kind of liked that. I thought that was very interesting aspect. And that's because of their communist heritage, where the communist philosophy was you have to work for the state and to make China great and to make society great, and everybody has to contribute, so also women, which is actually quite logical. So I thought that was quite interesting. Second difference was I felt is they were very open to learn. Very, very, very open. They were very willing to learn. They knew they came from nothing. They knew they have to go fast, and they were willing to take input from everywhere. So you never heard like, yeah, but this is why we do it in China and we don't care. So maybe sometimes you heard that a little bit in the Japanese way or the Korean way. In China, you never had this arrogance like we know everything. I found them quite open, but also very focused. And then, the hard work, the hierarchy, when the boss says something, that's it, and you do it. That is the same. That runs through them.
In conclusion, the Chinese auto industry has developed into a daunting competitor to traditional automakers. Their way of working is different. Their long-term focus differs from Western automakers, and their willingness to take risks and try new things sets them apart. I think that Gianfranco Pizzuto sums it up the best.
I'm sincerely convinced that if we have a chance, we Western, we want to have a chance of being able to compete is by getting to work with them together and not banning them with the tariffs, etc., and isolating ourselves. So my fear is that if we continue to put up this kind of fight, this tariff fight, is that we are becoming the new communists, in the sense that we want to block the others to coming and show us how things could be done.
I hope this provided some insights into the rapidly developing Chinese auto industry and the culture that drives it. It only scratches the surface here, but it's a good start for those in the West that are drawing up their strategies for surviving and even thriving. Until next week, keep on driving.
Thank you for joining us on today's journey. Please remember to like and subscribe to the Auto Ethnographer and leave us a rating or comment. For more information, visit our website at auto-ethnographer.com. You can also follow on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.